So we're going to be focusing on developing resilience. Resilience is a resource that you can use to move forward, helping yourself and helping the people you care about. That green circle represents a safe space. And in the safe space, we're going to have 3 guides. The first guide that we're going to be talking about, this is Alice. Alice is a person who's useful for us today as a guide because I met her in 2014. She had survived 2 different tornadoes that destroyed both of her homes. The 2001 tornado in Joplin, I went and did some work there afterwards. I didn't meet her then. I met her in 2014. She was a special education aide at an elementary school that got absolutely destroyed with several children and a few teachers killed in Moore, Oklahoma. She lost her home in Joplin. She moved to Moore. The tornado came and got her in Moore in 2013. She was completely overwhelmed by grief for the children that she had lost, killed, and some moved away, and the memories of their deaths. So she had a combination of grief and trauma. She was actually involved during the tornado, actually throwing children into the bathroom as the roof was being torn off the main building. And it only took the tornado was over them for only a couple of minutes. But those minutes were just seared in her brain. And so when I met her, she was getting ready she'd already decided she was going to retire. We got everybody together. The teachers got together with me and my crew a couple of days before school started in 2014 in order to prepare them to transition the children. Alice showed up and she had decided to retire. She decided not to. She stayed and she participated in rebuilding the school, basically. And that really was an important ingredient to her trauma recovery. The next person we're going to talk about as a guide is Billy. Billy is a combat veteran, and he was a person that I've worked with. By the way, all of these people I've anonymized so that you won't be able to identify who they are, but they're actually really real people. Billy, 58-year-old, struggled with substance abuse after returning home, decided to go ahead and kill himself.
Hey there, you stuck? Oh, I know what that's like. Yeah, I've been there, done that. This soldier has plenty of stuck in me. I thought it was permanent, something I couldn't get rid of, like a scar. Scars I've got plenty of. It was my ex who first said, "Oh, you've got stinking thinking." I'm figuring, what does she know? She hasn't been where I have. Then the cops take me to a psych unit and I run into an old staff sergeant who says, "Hey, nut, your problem is stinking thinking." There it was again. Then I hear it from one of the docs. It's like a conspiracy. Everybody knows something about me but me. Okay, I was pissed off all the time. Who wouldn't be? You know what a hellhole life can be, or at least that world we were in could be. Pissed off, it makes perfect sense. That's a little of the stinking thinking that kept me stuck. You see, what we think affects how we feel. What we feel affects how we think. It's simple, huh? For me, it was like a simple trap that kept me going round and round and round and round until I stuck a 9mm in my mouth. I was foobar, man. My Melissa hadn't come home from school when she did, I wouldn't be talking to you. And Melissa, she'd be without her daddy. She doesn't want that, and neither do I. So I got hold of a weapon that I had never heard of, CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful, but it can help you take charge of your life again. Are you sick of being stuck? I was. And all it took was learning a few new basics to develop some new habits. You can do that. I'm willing to help you. Do you want to get unstuck?
Our third safe guide is a young woman named Cynthia. I met Cynthia when she was, I think, seven years old, right after she was involved in a very bad automobile accident. And she wound up being very severely burned, and a couple of her relatives were killed. I worked with her over several years. She was hospitalized for several months and actually went to school at the hospital school. One of the important issues is that her single mother has other children and very few resources, and that's an important issue for many of us here. There aren't enough resources for people who need them in this town, in this county, on the ridge or down here. So one of the things that is really important to do is to take a look at the kinds of resources we can develop here today, tools that we can develop, people that we can develop relationships with who can become resources, taking a look at ourselves becoming resources for other people using some of the tools we'll talk about today. And this is what happened, and this is I haven't talked to Cynthia for several years now, but she joined the Brownies in the 3rd grade. And she went on and stuck with Girl Scouts and eventually became an ambassador. They call it the top level in Girl Scouts. Alice, Billy, and Cynthia all have several things in common, even though our own trauma experiences are unique to us and we are unique individuals. But they've got many, many things to teach us that I want to share with you today. Let me ask you to participate with me, and what do you see among those three that they're already teaching us? Some of the things in their stories that run through their stories. What kinds of things did you maybe pick up in the stories that I just shared with you? Yes, please.
All three of them are now involved in healing by giving to others.
Exactly right. All three of them are now involved in healing by giving to others. Absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. And one of the silver linings in this very, very dark cloud is that there's a lot of need to help people. There's a lot of opportunity to give to others. And so even though you may not feel like you've got a lot of resources yourself, you've got yourself. And by the end of the morning, I hope that you'll have a few tools, a little bit more knowledge that you'll have to be able to share with other people so that you can become a resource for at least one other person, if not a group of people. We've got this safe space that we need to be in together to be able to manage the trauma of the campfire. There are many things that we're facing that will trigger us, that will cause problems for us, but if we do it together in a safe space as a group, we're going to be able to manage much better than if we do it alone. We've all lost a lot. 85 people died. You don't need to be told that it was the worst catastrophe that the United States has faced in many, many years. Everybody lost. Everybody lost. Those of you who are on the ridge lost more than anybody, but many, many people lost. So we're going to approach this as an educational process using what we all have, our brains. And I'm going to help you learn how to use your brain better. So what we have here are two brains. There are 100 billion neurons approximately in each of those skulls. Depending upon how old you are, you have between 200 billion and down to about 70 billion neurons in your brain. For a child, a 1-year-old, you've got about 200 billion. Everybody started out with about 200 billion neurons. And then as we age, we lose those neurons. The neurons are the longest living cells in your body. When you die, the neurons that you die with, they will have been created in your first year of life. So at this age, at my advanced age, I've got about 72.3 billion neurons left. I counted them last week. My skull is as big as it ever was, so there's a little more room in there for those neurons to get around. What I used to say, and I won't say it in this workshop, is that the female brain is more wrinkled. Oh, wait a minute, I just said it. I'm sorry. But that's true. The female has all those neurons compacted, and so the wrinkles help to allow those neurons the same number of neurons to be in the skull. And that makes the female brain a little bit more capable than the male brain in some important tasks that we'll talk about as we go through the day. This is another shot of the cerebral cortex, we call it. The cerebral cortex has two halves. You saw it in the previous diagram. What I'd like you to do is to put your hands out together like this, and fold your thumb as hard, almost painfully hard against the other side of your hand, and then wrap your fingers around and put your hands together. This is a model of your cerebral cortex. This is one of the many tools you can use to help people understand what we're talking about today. At the top, we've got what is called the cerebral cortex, or some people call it the rational brain, kind of the back of the hand. Under here, we've got what some people call the emotional brain. It's called the limbic system. And the relationship between our thinking brain up here and our emotional brain down here makes us fully human. And one of the things that happens with trauma is that at the very tip of the thumb, there's something called the amygdala, and I'm going to show you a picture of it in a little bit. And the amygdala at the very tip of your thumb is our early warning system. So when we hear a siren come, or somebody cuts us off in traffic, or somebody yells, the amygdala picks that up and all of a sudden sends us into fight, flight, or freeze. And one of the things that happens with people who get stuck in trauma is that the amygdala is overactive and not able to be downregulated by this little piece over here called the hippocampus. Okay, so you've got this model now that I'm going to help to show you some pictures of in just a moment. You've got the cerebral cortex up here, two hemispheres, the amygdala down here at the tip of your thumb, your early warning system, and the hippocampus over here, your little finger, trying to downregulate and help your amygdala not continue to get you into fight, flight, or freeze. And it's the integration of all of those parts and many, many more with our body that helps us to get back into what we call homeostasis, which I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. This is one of the major parts of the brain. It's inside the brain. It's right here. In our hand model, it's like your index finger where it bends. This is called, well, I'm not even going to get into the name of it, anterior cingulate cortex and some other fancy names. But one of the points about this is that this is kind of the processing station where information comes in and gets managed, if it's going to be managed appropriately, so that we don't develop PTSD, as an example. This works really well. People who do develop PTSD, it doesn't work as well. So that's one of the things that we'll be talking about today, how to help your, what we call the ACC, do a better job for you. This is a model of the brain that, well, let's go ahead and turn the lights off now and put your 3D glasses on. So we're going to use the eyes as our point of reference. And what you've got over the top here is the cerebral cortex. That's kind of, we are kind of looking at an X-ray image so that this looks like a cloud, but it's the cerebral cortex. That's the back of your hands. Down here is your spinal cord. And let's go ahead and, as we go through looking at the different parts of the brain, we're really going to focus on the under part, the emotional brain, because that's where we start to get stuck when we have a problem with trauma. Here is the amygdala here. Another shot of the amygdala right there. Here is the amygdala and the hippocampus. And notice that you've got one on each side of your brain. Down here we have the links to the rest of the body, and this is where therapists who do mind-body work come in. So we've got another shot on the left side, the amygdala and the hippocampus, and out here we've got the olfactory nerves. This is going to your nose. So the relationship between the amygdala and the hippocampus is really important to pay attention to, and we'll be studying that today. We'll also be studying a little bit about what's called the vagal nerve, which is down here, that goes down into your thorax and down into your bowels even, and that links your heart and your brain together. So the heart-brain connection is handled through these nerves right here. That's called the 10th cranial nerve or the vagal nerve. So this is the amygdala. This is your early warning network. When a message comes in, the amygdala picks it up. If it's a rattlesnake, if it's a squirrel in the weeds, at first you don't know the difference between the two. The amygdala communicates with the hippocampus. The hippocampus says, it's a squirrel, you don't need to run and hide. But if the hippocampus says, wait a minute, there's no squirrels in this part of the forest, or no, this just doesn't make sense, it's probably a rattlesnake, then you do run. Fight, flight, or freeze. The hippocampus is where information is stored for brief periods of time. The information that's going into your brain right now is stored there for just a couple of hours. When we talk about the first tool we're going to have you use, Emma's going to explain how that's an important way for us to intervene with helping people understand that they don't need to just be in the fight, flight, or freeze mode after they've experienced trauma. The hippocampus is a real important piece of the brain to be able to manage rather than have it just manage us. So the amygdala and the hippocampus are tightly linked. Over here is that olfactory nerve. One of the things that happens after a trauma like you've experienced that involves smoke or any other odor is that you get triggered and you have kind of a panic reaction whenever you smell smoke. Has anybody had that happen to them? Pretty common. And that's because the brain is wired that way. Now, it's not indicating that there's another wildfire coming through anymore, but it's an innocuous sort of thing. The problem is that people all of a sudden have a panic reaction. They say, it just came out of nowhere. Well, no, actually it didn't just come out of nowhere. Very often it's because there was a very subtle odor that your brain picked up that you didn't even know that your brain picked up. Boom! You have a fight, flight, or freeze, or maybe even a panic attack. And that's one of the things that happens to people without them really being aware of it. So I want you to pay attention to how that's a potential problem that you might want to deal with. The vagus nerve starts here and goes down into your heart, your lungs, your bowel. It's part of what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. It's part of your calming system. And people who do mind-body work, therapists who do mind-body work, depend on the relationships that go through these nerves to be able to help people use their body to calm their mind. And as we wrap up today, I'm going to take you through a little episode and show you how to do that.